Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Professor's Kitchen. Today I am in my kitchen again, my little struggle kitchen here, and I am going to do another dinner crime video. I'm so excited about today's dinner crime video because I am going to be preparing something that I've never prepared before, and if you saw last week's video, you know that sometimes I struggle. My kitchen is a struggle kitchen, and I struggle sometimes to make the right thing look like it's supposed to, but I like learning new things, and so that's again what this channel is about. That's what the Professor's Kitchen is about. So I am going to try a new recipe today while I tell you a story about a crime that occurred, and no one died in this one, so sorry to disappoint you. No one died, but a crime did occur, and I'm going to talk about the author, the crime, and I'm also going to prepare the author's favorite food, which is lamb korma. That's right, lamb, as in Mary had a little dinner. So, to all of my vegetarian friends, I apologize, this one is not for you. But you are welcome to go back and take a look at last week's video and try your hand at my peach cobbler if you have not prepared peach cobbler before. It was a pretty fun and easy recipe. And like I said in that video, once you kind of get the filling basics down, then you can make lots of different fun things like peach cobbler turnovers or peach cobbler cheesecake, or you can just do the peach cobbler topping on waffles, which is really fun. So it is entirely up to you. It is a super versatile recipe, and I highly recommend that you check that out. But in today's video, I am going to go ahead and get cooking while I tell you a little story about someone named Salman Rushdie. And if you've never heard of Salman Rushdie before, he is an author. He's still alive, as far as I know. Rona has not taken out this cantankerous man. And yes, I'm calling him cantankerous because I just feel like that's the appropriate name for someone who's been married like 4 times and doesn't really seem to like women. I don't know. He's difficult. He's just kind of a difficult person, so whatever. But Salman Rushdie is probably best known for the problems that he's created for a whole lot of people when he had a fatwa issued against him. So I will explain what a fatwa is a little bit. I had to look it up myself. I didn't know. I kind of knew, but I didn't really know. I looked it up because that's what you do when you don't know something. You look for the correct answer. You look it up. You find out. You learn. So that's what I did. But he was married to Padma Lakshmi. If any of you know who Padma Lakshmi is, or if you've ever watched Top Chef, she used to be a judge on Top Chef. She was also married to Salman Rushdie. But that was like his 3rd wife or something, I think. I don't know. But he was also mentioned on an episode of Bob's Burgers, and he made a little guest appearance in the very first Bridget Jones's Diary movie. So those are just kind of references. I don't know. If you have seen one of those, if you know who Padma Lakshmi is, you may have seen a picture of her with him at some point, and if not, then maybe you saw the episode of Bob's Burgers, or maybe you saw him make an appearance in Bridget Jones's Diary. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe none of those things. But I'm going to go ahead and get cooking, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Salman Rushdie, who is one of my favorite authors. In spite of the fact that I said that he's cantankerous, he is actually one of my favorite authors. So let's get cooking. So, as I mentioned, Salman Rushdie, much like Burroughs and Baraka, is a little bit of a controversial author. He's had his issues over the years, and both with women, like I said, but also with just the books that he writes. He really writes some pretty incredible things. They're pretty highbrow for the most part. I hardly ever read any of his books without a dictionary right next to me, or like translate or something like that, because he's one of those authors who likes to include things like just fancy French words and stuff like that in a lot of his work. So it's just helpful to have a dictionary on hand if you ever get a chance to read through any of his work. But it is really interesting. The very first book of his that I fell in love with, and why I fell in love with his writing, I had to read a story in undergrad that he wrote, and it was called Haroun and the Sea of Stories. And it was really meant to be a children's book. It was a book that he was writing for his son. And so it's cute, and in the sense that it's basically a children's book, but it is also meant to be read later on so that his son could kind of understand politics and where he was in his life, and the way that politics were at that particular time. And so it can be read as a children's book, but it can also be read again later on as an adult, and you can see all of the political undertones and things like that in the book as well. So sort of a dual purpose, dual meaning. It has multiple meanings depending on who the reader is, which is kind of cool when you think about it, because who would think that an adult could get a message out of a children's book, right? I know a lot of cartoons and stuff are doing that now too, where it's kind of meant to be for kids, but some of the jokes really kind of go over a child's head, and it's clearly there for the adults to just laugh and enjoy the movie along with their kids, right? Or the cartoon along with their kids. So his book, Haroun and the Sea of Stories, is definitely one of those kinds of books. And I absolutely loved it because, again, it was an easy-ish read. And if you just read it for entertainment purposes, you could totally do that and love it. And if not, if you were a grown-up and you knew things about politics, then you could totally see all the political overtones or undertones or whatever in the book. So it's a little bit of something for everyone, which is really kind of nice. His son actually asked him to write a book that he could read and understand. And so he did, at some point, he did actually write a book for his son so that his son could understand it. But he also wanted, again, to kind of get that political message out to his son and help his son to understand it in a way that he could understand it later on in life. So that is Haroun and the Sea of Stories. Salman Rushdie is also known for including a lot of food in his books. And the one meal in particular that he mentions quite often is Lamb Korma, which is the dish that I'm going to attempt to prepare today. I am currently heating up some ghee and onions together. I will include the full recipe in the description box below so that you can check it out. I actually found it in 2 different places and 2 different recipes. I'm going to go with his recipe from Parade that I found on parade.com. I'll include that recipe, but I found a really cute little write-up about it on this other website called, I think it's called Salt and something. I'll include it in the description box below. It's a really cute little website, and it has lots of different pairings, like I like to do, with literature and food together. But this particular recipe looked easy enough and interesting. I don't know. Just in case I mess it up, though, I have some korma sauce on the side, which has been it smells so good. If you have ever cooked with Indian spices or with like curry paste and stuff before, it's a curry paste, it's a korma paste, and it smells so good. And my whole kitchen smells like korma paste right now, which is fantastic. It smells so good in here. Anyway, Salman Rushdie was actually born in 1947 in Bombay, India, which is now Mumbai, India. And during the time that he was born, there was really a lot going on in the country at that time. Ultimately, all the tension and tumult and whatnot caused his parents to leave, and they moved to England. And so he's considered sort of an Indian British or British Indian author or whatever. So he spent the majority of his life, though, in England, not in India. Although I think he does go back and forth on occasion, and he considers himself to be an Indian British person or whatever. I think he feels that duality of nations within himself because he spent so much time. He knows that he's ethnically or culturally Indian, but also he basically grew up in England. So there's that. He graduated from Cambridge, which I feel like you can't really graduate from Cambridge without saying like, Cambridge, I went to Cambridge, and having like some sort of airs about you. Correct me if I'm wrong. Feel free to comment on that and say, no, I totally went to Cambridge and I'm a really cool, down-to-earth person. Yeah, okay. But he graduated from Cambridge, and he went on to be a writer. Like, he just has done pretty much nothing but writing, I don't think, for the majority of his life. I think he did some editing at some point as well, but for the majority of his career, he has been a writer. And he's, like I said, he's really, really good at it. So do what you're good at, right? So Salman Rushdie published his first book in 1975, but I did not read that book. I definitely need to go back and read that one. It was called Grimace, I think. Grimus. Grimace, I don't know. But I haven't read that one. But the one that he published next, I believe, in 1981, was called Midnight's Children. And this one came out and it was a hit. Immediately, it was a hit. And there's no two ways about it. Like, this book is so good. If you have not read Midnight's Children, you absolutely have to read this book. It is so, so good. And I have sort of now a personal attachment to this book as well, because my son was actually born on August 15th, which is Indian Independence Day. And Indian Independence Day is one of the things that's mentioned in Midnight's Children. And pretty much the entire story is based around two children. It's sort of a folk tale about two children who were born at midnight, the stroke of midnight, on Indian Independence Day, and they were switched at birth. So it's one of those switched at birth stories that's really, really fun to read. So I highly recommend that you take a look at Midnight's Children and read through that if you can get your hands on a copy of it. So in 1988, Salman Rushdie got himself into quite a bit of trouble with the publication of his book, Satanic Verses. Now, the book is really just supposed to depict magical realism, but it also managed to insult pretty much the entire Muslim community by depicting the Prophet Muhammad in an unfavorable way. And the book was immediately denounced by the British Muslim community as blasphemous. So as you can imagine, this was a pretty big deal and a pretty bad thing, especially over just a book, right? Books are supposed to be read to be enjoyed, right? And he managed to irritate, piss off, anger an entire community of Muslims in Britain. As is usually the case, word spread about the book and about what it said about the Prophet Muhammad and the Quran. And eventually it got all the way to Pakistan, where violent demonstrations broke out in the streets over this book, which is madness. Like, how do you start writing in the streets about a book? But this actually happened. People were really, really upset about this. So upset, in fact, that there were bombings at bookstores and rioting in the streets, and they obviously banned the book. And the then ruler of the Iranian Muslim population, the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, probably said that totally wrong, but he issued an edict or a fatwa against Salman Rushdie, which is basically just like a hit. They basically put a hit out against Salman Rushdie and said that if anyone in the Muslim community saw him walking down the street, they would get a reward for killing him. And if they did not feel comfortable killing him themselves, then they would be rewarded for telling someone else that he was there, and then that person would kill them. What? Either way, they wanted him dead. Thankfully, Scotland Yard was on this. They immediately rushed to his aid, and they put him into basically like a protection program to keep him safe. And this didn't really seem like it was going to go on for too much longer. In fact, the Ayatollah Khomeini passed away, and so one would think that like after he died, maybe things would die down with him, but that was not the case. This ended up going on 4 years. He was in hiding 4 years and would eventually write his sort of memoir about his time in hiding years and years later, which is called Joseph Anton. And I've read that book as well. I really wanted to read that book because I wanted to see more about or learn more about that time that he was in hiding when he wrote Harun and the Sea of Stories and other books, because he continued to work even though he was in hiding. But Joseph Anton was kind of interesting because he really gets a chance to tell his story about that time and what it was like being shuffled around from safe house to safe house and making very few public appearances, how it affected different relationships, both with his wife and his children. So it was a pretty interesting book. And he got the name Joseph Anton. It was a combination of names from Joseph Conrad and Anton Chekhov, which of course an author would do something like that, right? They would make up a name that's based on other great authors. So that's what he did. He came up with this name, Joseph Anton, and that was the name that he was referred to the entire time, the years that he spent in hiding. This actually went on for 10 years. He was in hiding for 10 years because of this book and the Fatwa, the edict that was against him, saying that if you see him, kill him. So as I mentioned, the Grand Ayatollah Khomeini, Ruhollah Khomeini, died in June of 1989. But the edict just hung around for ever and ever, it seems like, for a really long time afterwards. And the entire time that this was going on, Rushdie was just in hiding. For the most part. He did, like I said, he got around a little bit. He was able to make some movements here and there, but he was under the strict protection of Scotland Yard the entire time. Also during that time, Rushdie came out and basically tried to apologize for writing what he wrote and saying what he did, and he even kind of went back on all of the things that he had sort of denounced in his life regarding being a Muslim. He was completely against it. He was not a practicing Muslim at the time, and he tried to say that it was a perfectly good religion. Like, no, just kidding. No, being Muslim is great. It's wonderful. There's nothing wrong with it. The Quran is great. It's wonderful. He said that. He apologized, I guess, thinking that all of this was just going to go away, but it didn't. And then years after that, he decided he was going to take it all back again. Okay, so while that's cooking, this will be like my time in protection, like Rushdie. But he continued to write and he continued to publish books, and he put out some pretty good stuff. He wrote my favorite book, like I said, Harun and the Sea of Stories, in 1990. He also put out Imaginary Homelands in 1991. He wrote a short story collection called East West in 1994, or published in 1994, and The Moor's Last Sigh in 1995. So he kept himself busy during that time. So basically, after 10 years in hiding, the Iranian government finally decided that the fatwa was over, everything was fine, Rushdie could come out of hiding, he didn't have to do that anymore, and life kind of sort of went back to normal for the most part. He had kept up quite a bit of his regular life, even while he was in hiding. He still made time to see his son. He got married again. He had a rather difficult relationship with two ex-wives, which he wrote about in his memoir, Joseph Anton. And later on, Padma Lakshmi, his then fourth wife, I believe, also decided to write a little bit about her own experience with him. And she talked about that in her book, Love, Loss, and What We Ate, which seems pretty appropriate for this channel. And also for her, considering that she was a judge on Top Chef. So anyway, and they seem to share sort of a love of food, which was kind of cool. And since they're both of Indian descent, I'm sure there was a whole lot of really delicious food going on in their kitchen, in their lives, and whatnot. But he responded to her book in sort of a negative way. And this is one of the reasons why I call him cantankerous, because he's just not right sometimes. He really isn't. So in response to her book, he replied by saying, quote, "It's strange given that I've been married 4 times, but I actually don't think marriage is necessary." What? Girls like it, especially if they've never been married before. It's the dress. Girls want a wedding. They don't want a marriage. If only you could have weddings without marriages. Like Rushdie himself, the book Joseph Anton, his memoir, is kind of strange. The whole thing is written in third person, which is really unusual for a memoir. But again, it's Rushdie, so that's normal. All right, so Rushdie continues to write. He has been publishing pretty much something like year after year for a while now. He published Golden House, which I think my husband got me that for my birthday. So nice of him. He knows me. That came out in, I think, 2012. And he just, he's out there. He's writing. He's doing stuff. He was actually knighted as well in 2007, which, again, got criticized, this time by the Iranian government, criticized the actions of the British government for knighting him, especially after everything that happened with the Fatwa. So, I mean, I kind of feel like that was an appropriate response to be like,
really? This guy?
All right, so this is it. This is the finished product. Yay, I did it. I think it's supposed to look like this. So I'm going to taste it and just see what I did. Right, wrong, or indifferent. This is dinner tonight, so here we go. All right, I just put it over some white rice, so we'll see. It's really, really hot. This is actually really good. And I'm very proud of myself right now. Wow. There's so much flavor in Indian food. I just love it. I love it so much. And I'm talking with food in my mouth. Okay. That brings me to the end of this dinner crime video. I hope you enjoyed this one, even though no one died in this dinner crime video. There was actually a crime in there. That fatwa, my goodness. That is some really serious stuff. I hope that I never write or publish or anger anyone in any religious community, that's for sure, because this stuff is taken really, really seriously. It's not something to play with at all. Not at all. Take it seriously. Don't do it. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. You can subscribe, share it with a friend, and I will see you in the next one. Ciao for now. gonna love you no matter what. Yay!
Actually.
Yay!